and welcome back to my channel. So you probably know by now that I write historic fiction. I currently have 10 novels and 2 works in progress. 5 of these published books are Civil War time period. 1 takes place in South Dakota in the 1920s, and I have a Mackinac time travel series. So clearly it's obvious that I have a passion for history and literature, and I enjoy writing, speaking, and teaching about these topics. And I'm a middle school teacher, so I get to do this as part of my day job as well. Now, I am by no means an expert on any of this, but I have learned quite a bit about writing in the past 8 years of my experience as an author. And so I also want to start sharing some tips and ideas on writing not just historic fiction, which is my genre, but really any type of writing. Now, in true teacher form, I also have some handouts, so I will put some on my website and I'll also link it below. So firstly, a few things about writing historic fiction. Writing this genre might be for you if you love reading novels set in past times. And this is how I started, with Little House on the Prairie, Dear America, and then I moved on from there. You also might enjoy writing if you enjoy learning more about that time period that you have an idea for. And also that your idea would work best in a historical period. And so these are actually 2 cases with my Pride and Prejudice novel. I wanted to do a Pride and Prejudice version, and I wanted to do a 1920s novel, so being able to blend them together worked really well. Another reason that you might want to write historic fiction is if you believe you may have been born in the wrong century, which is definitely a case with me. Now, you might want to avoid writing historic fiction, one, if you don't like research. This is what you're going to be doing a lot of, so if it's not for you, you might want to look elsewhere. Also, if you're in a hurry to finish, with historic fiction, you really need to take your time to complete that story. So I'm a complete history nerd, so this first tip is absolutely no hardship for me, and it's also how I get a lot of my ideas. And this tip is to immerse yourself in the time period you're writing about as best as you can. Try to go and see what your characters would have seen. Try to walk where your characters would have walked. And if possible, try to actually do what they would have done like they would have done it. I'm a very visual person, and so it really helps me when I'm able to do that. So some things that I'll do to do that is to visit historic homes. I'll go to living history museums. And I was actually able to get a chance to work in a living history museum at Mackinac City. And so I was able to really, like I said, do what my characters would have done. You can also visit the more traditional museums that are out there to get ideas. You can go to historic reenactments. There might be some closer than you think. And you also can visit where the story takes place, which can also be very helpful. You can also watch TV shows, movies, documentary, and even video games can help immerse you in the time period. I wouldn't have thought of that, but my students have that idea. As authors, we know how valuable reading other authors is, so read historical fiction. You're also going to need to get used to reading nonfiction as well. Basically, do what you can to learn as much as you can about that time period. So after I get the idea, then I get into the research. Research is imperative for writing historic fiction. As an author, you want to be as accurate as possible, and this is especially true in historic fiction. Even though you may be writing fictional characters, events, or places, you want to make sure that what happens could have happened within that time period. So I always start by looking for journals, diaries, newspapers, and letters from the actual historic figures. And then I'm going to be able to take a lot of notes and get even more ideas. I'll also read nonfiction to get these ideas, and everyday life books are also extremely helpful. Other great resources are historic maps because landscapes do change. So if I were to go to the Mississippi River and look at it today from Vicksburg, I'm going to be looking at a different Mississippi River than my characters would have in 1865 as the river was rerouted at one point. You can also take a look at cookbooks, not just to learn about what would have been cooked, but also these often show how things would have been cooked and what that process would have been like. You can also look at memoirs, as those are a really good place to get not only ideas, but also to see what life was really like for these individuals. And finally, with research, don't be afraid to talk with historians or reenactors. They want to preserve history, they want to tell these stories, and if you let them know what you're doing and why you're doing it, they will want to help you with that. So we know that it's important to research, and we've got some ideas of where to go for the research, but it's also important to look at what to research. So in short, everything. Even the most mundane details can be important to look at. You want to make sure that you understand that different people, attitudes of the time, current events, politics, these all shaped life. Things like fashion, hygiene, architecture, what domestic life was like, diseases, medication, epidemics, jobs, food, and eating habits are going to be important. What education was like. You can even look at some historical textbooks. You're going to want to look at modes of transportation, religious traditions, and how they've changed over the years. You're going to want to look at weapons that would have been used at that time period. What may have been popular for one group of people, what would have been popular for another group of persons, and also looking at technology. What new technological advancements were available at the time period, and who would have been using them. Now, you can get this information from those aforementioned places, as well as the internet. Don't be afraid to use Google. You're going to want to check and double check, but also be aware that it's very easy to fall through research rabbit holes. Also, when writing historic fiction, you have to remember that the characters you're writing have been shaped by the time period that they live in. Their ways of life, their views, the society that surrounds them, their thoughts, the economy of the time period, as well as the expectations of people at that time are all so important to take into consideration, especially when you look at building your characters. As with all writing, you also want to make sure that you show and not just tell. You want to get your readers to be able to feel like they're visiting that time and place. And just like fantasy or sci-fi writers, you want to make sure that you build the world for your audience, as many of them will not be as familiar with the historic world. Also, as with all writing, you want to be organized. There are many organizational styles, and I've actually tried quite a few, and I'm still trying to fine-tune what my style is. But you want to make sure that you keep all your notes and information together, whether it's digital or even in a notebook like I like to do. And you especially want to do this if you're writing a series. You want to make sure that you fact check things as well. For example, my mom's a nurse, and so I'm constantly checking medical facts with her to make sure that I'm being accurate. You want to make sure that you plan and have an outline, even a basic one for those of you who can write by the seat of your pants. Timelines are key with historic fiction. Some other things to do while writing historic fiction is to look for fun details that you can weave into your story. For example, the U.S. cavalry actually used camels in the Civil War at one point. College basketball was happening for women in the 1920s. And the Red Baron that Snoopy battles in all of his comics is based on a real person. You also want to make sure that you take language and slang into consideration. You can do this using books, or you can just look up etymology, which is the study of the history of words, on a lot of different websites. You also want to remember to take your time, as I mentioned earlier, and you don't want to get overwhelmed by the process. Take a step back for a little bit if you need to. Finally, get to writing and have fun with it. That's what we write for, is to have fun. So that's all I have for you right now, but let me know in the comments below if you'd like more behind the scenes writing content, more detail on any of the things that I just spoke of, because I really just scratched the surface with a lot of these things, or let me know if you just prefer the historical content. As always, please like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.